Welcome to the Praxologie podcast, where theology fuels the mission of the church. We desire to see the church in Central and Eastern Europe equipped to think biblically, reflect theologically, and act missionally. Today, we're going to continue in our general theme of theological reflection and mission. And in this episode, we will reflect on a theology, so to speak, of authority. Before we get there, we continue on to the new year, and I just wonder, how is your missional resolve doing for those of you who are listening? Are you stopping to reflect more? How is that going for you? We would like to know, so let us know at praxologie@formission.org.uk. And also, don't forget to send us your questions for our Q&A episode. Deadline is January 31st for that episode. That will be coming out relatively soon, and we're very excited to join that conversation with you. So authority for today's episode is a main target in a lot of societies. Sometimes it's outright. It's very blatant, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
I don't trust institutions because they don't care about the common man and they just use people.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see that really profoundly in post-communist countries like the Czech Republic, where you just see Christianity as this institution that's power-hungry and it just wants your money, not to be trusted.
In many ways, we have to say that narrative is actually true. I'm not just trying to throw that aside for sure. But other times it's more of a maybe giving into a conspiracy theory read online or somewhere because of a general wariness of the narrative, that's put forth in the news and politics. I can't trust that. And therefore, there's just like a general sort of, it's not a super harsh critique of institutions, just a lazy or something.
Yeah.
It's not the best word.
Yeah. Lack of trust. It's a very, very kind of settled lack of trust. It's just kind of a part of the way that you view the world. Like, not gonna trust them. I'll still go along with it, but maybe not fully.
Yeah, for sure. And for today, we're going to be adding sort of the missional piece, the missional element, through looking at Generation Z. Now, I'm an American, so I say Z, and I recognize that
Z.
It should be said Z.
Somebody made a comment to me yesterday on a Zoom call when I was talking to them from the UK, and they asked the question, "What's it like having English as your second language?"
Yes. I think, was I on the same call?
I think you were on the same call.
Maybe I was. And we just kind of laughed, right? Because in many ways,
so British English
is the right form to the American view.
That's right.
Of speaking English. But even beyond that, most European languages say Z instead of Z. We'll try to do both. Forgive us for messing that up along the way. But that'll be the missional piece, Generation Zet, and what they teach us about authority. And one of the key things really moving forward for the church into the future is to reflect on what we do with that piece of authority. It's a big piece that sort of seems to be remained to have been dealt with up to this point in a meaningful way. We just want to start the discussion today and moving forward just a little here on Praxologie. So Tyler, tell us though, what generation do you fall in, and maybe what's your experience with that before we get into Generation Z?
So I was born in 1990. Which puts me pretty clearly in the millennial generation because I grew up around the millennium. I remember gathering fireworks on New Year's Eve, 2000, and my dad had gone out and was like, "Oh, it's 2000. We should probably celebrate." Got some fireworks and we collected them and we went out to the backyard and we shot off like 5 of them and we were like, "Oh, we should have bought more fireworks." Oh well. So anyway,
there's a lesson in there and counting the cost.
That's right. Marking transitions. Yeah, exactly. So, but in general, I think for me, part of being a millennial is, that I kind of grew into the technological advancements in the world. Like I didn't grow up with an iPhone or iPad, but in my teen years, I saved up to buy an iPod. Does anyone still remember those?
They were excellent.
They were great. So
notice we said were.
Were excellent. I think I still have my original one somewhere as kind of an antique now, which is hilarious. But in general, I remember, especially when I got to college, the call that I heard, the call from those older than me into my life was, you can do it. Mm-hmm. You can take on the world and you can change the world. Just do these things and go, be bold, be brave, and the world will never be the same because of your presence and your action. And so that's what I kind of grew up hearing.
Yeah, very much of a type of idealism, or follow your dreams. I think we saw that phrase quite often as well in different ways. And not to throw the older generation under the proverbial bus. There are wonderful things that were passed on. We're sort of stereotyping for a reason up to this point. We could focus on positives as well that were passed down. But one of the biggest things, idealism, dreaming forward, but not necessarily always following through, I think. So I find myself in the millennial category as well. Slightly later than Tyler, just a little bit older, but nonetheless. So let's move into defining Generation Zet. Who are we talking about, Tyler? What does this mean?
Yep. So Generation Z is anyone born between 1997 and about 2012. So that means anyone who's currently between the ages of 10 and 25. And contrast that with millennials, who were born between about 1981 and 96, and they're about 26 to 41. So if you're listening, you might want to place yourself and see, where do I fit? Do any of the things that we talk about here apply to me, or do I have any experience maybe with someone who's in one of those categories, particularly Generation Z? Maybe you have students in your youth group, maybe you have some leaders around you, or maybe you yourself are a part of this generation.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing that I think we see right now across Central and Eastern Europe, broadly speaking, is a lot of leaders have emerged who are millennials and who are leading people who are in Generation Z. Or at least maybe Generation Z oriented, predominantly probably in that category, especially thinking of youth groups, churches that are a lot younger. And there's definitely a clash of ideas that it's only made greater when we talk about, I think, Generation X, which was the parents of millennials, who are leading ministries. And there's some realities there of people in Generation X, parents of millennials in Central and Eastern Europe, who led a church and built it with their own hands in many ways throughout communism. Yeah, it's there's a reality there of it just a natural, like, not wanting to let go because of the hard work that has been laid in the foundation of that local church. Just a lot of very real realities when it comes to that. But in moving forward, we see still that happening. A lot of churches that are younger and growing now, led by millennials, with Gen Z as a main, how can we say, target group?
Yeah,
perhaps.
for sure.
And one person who can help us in thinking about that, his name is Tim Elmore. He's done a lot of research. He's basically created a business around telling people about Generation Z and why they should care and how they can integrate them into businesses, churches, so on and so forth. If you search his name on YouTube, you'll find his organization has tons of talks. He's done, I'm sure, TED Talks and everything else. He's made the circuits, mostly talking about Gen Z. He has a lot to say also on millennials, but he does focus in the Generation Z realm. So he says, Tim Elmore, in the move from millennials to Gen Z, we see confidence to caution, spending to saving. I think that's very, very true when I talk to people who are younger than me. Idealism to pragmatism. That's also very true. I think we see that even with our students at Formation. I think that's fair to say. Consuming media on our phones 24/7 to younger generation going, that's probably not okay, in which case it's actually not. Consuming media to creating it actually. So using it in a different way, but still using it very much so. And then viral to vanishing posts, which is interesting. We millennials wanted to create viral posts, and now the posts that Gen Z have, they can vanish. They 10 seconds or TikTok, others gone.
Yep.
And I'm sure they can be pulled from somewhere maybe, but they're vanishing. They're gone. So you can put anything out there with maybe less consequence. But what you put out there for those 10 seconds is actually very, very important and valued very highly by a lot of people. So interesting there. And then also anticipation to anxiety. Anxiety, not just because of various factors that have been in the last 2 or 3 years with the COVID pandemic, but less anticipation to looking at both sides of the coin, the positives and the negatives, and going, oh, like, do I have what it takes for that? And just going back and forth. So sort of an internal anxiety. And Elmore says that Gen Z is, and what do you think about this phrase, Tyler? Coping and hoping.
Well, I think that we see that the coping piece in just the rise of awareness about mental health. Generation Zet is much more open to talk about their own mental health and their struggles.
Absolutely.
And they don't always, I think they recognize that not all of those kinds of issues can be solved as well. It's not like there's a magic bullet or a magic pill that can fix all of your problems. And so they kind of live this or expect to live this life of having to cope long term with some of these challenges. Mm-hmm. And yet there's not a hopelessness. There's a hope for what could be. But I think that they're much more honest and realistic about the reality of achieving those hopes, that it might be a long ways out.
Yeah. And I think that's, we can actually affirm that. That's actually, there's some really good stuff there of having a grounded view of reality and hope looking forward into the future. And now Tim Elmore also says, in related to coping and hoping, the phrase that he says Gen Z likes to say, I need your help, but I don't need your help. And so they're coping with this reality, and they have a hope, and they desire to have help, but at the same time, there's a strong individualism that I want to be able to do this myself. It's like that creating media piece. I want to do something that has value to it. And so there's an element of even hope within that, and contributing to society in many, many ways. So I need your help, but I don't need your help also leads, Tim Elmore says, to what he calls Pracademics. He calls Gen Z Pracademics. I don't think he created this term. This term existed before. I forget who officially created the term, but I love this word because that's what we're great about. Praxologie, Pracademic.
That's right.
We're running in the same in the same lane, most definitely. Now, Gen Z wants to know why before the how, and I think that's what he means by Pracademic. They're very, very practical, but the practical piece, they want to learn to do it themselves. They don't want to be told step 1, 2, 3, 4 in quite the same way. And so because of that, they want to know why. Like, what's the value in me doing that? Why should I put time and effort and everything into that? And they really want to put the why and the how together. And at the same time, in doing so, they're like we've said, very super practical in many, many ways. In terms of maybe an initial takeaway, one thing I'm thinking now is that Gen Z desires authority, but it must be the right kind of authority. I need your help, but I don't need your help. And so there's a type of authority that works, and there's a type of authority that doesn't. And if it doesn't work very well, it's going to feed into a lot of other narratives, and it's going to become very decentralized, and there will be nothing like authority, perhaps. That's maybe taking something to the far extreme, but something that we really need to be reflecting on. So Tyler, reflect on these character differences from millennials to Gen Z a little bit. And what do you think about this idea of I need help, but I don't need help, and thinking about authority for, the church, thinking missionally.
Right. So I think that as millennials, we were pretty much told, especially when it comes to authority and gaining authority and following authority, that you just gotta play the game. That was kind of what we were told growing up, of just, if you play the game, if you do these things, if you listen to those who are above you and respect them, then eventually you're going to get into that position as well. And then it's going to be great. And then you'll just continue to exercise your authority and grow and continue on in life. Maybe in church, it might look like, you just got to put in your service, serve humbly, and somebody's going to notice you, and then they're going to elevate you. You're going to get the next opportunity, and then you're going to prove yourself there, and then you're going to get the next opportunity. And I don't think that Gen Z has quite that idealistic view of what their own authority looks like. I think they've also seen too much abuse of authority, and so they're skeptical about this ladder. This. I
mean, even with so many scandals that we can say that are happening within churches.
That's right.
Feed into that, rightfully so.
That's right. And so they might say, yeah, I'd love to change things in this church, but I'm not gonna just be a cog in the machine. Mm-hmm. I'm not just gonna sit by and contribute to these terrible things that are happening, maybe to the extreme, but keep the system alive. If things need to be changed, then I'm gonna change them, or I'm gonna figure out a way kind of around the system. One thing as well is that I know that Generation Zet doesn't. You mentioned this. They don't trust authority for the sake of authority. They don't trust someone just because they have a position. Mm-hmm. Just because you're a pastor, just because you're a youth leader, just because you're a professor, does not mean that this generation is going to respect you or listen to you. What they're interested in theological terms, is your fruit, is, is your character.
Yes.
And that's also, I think, also different from previous generations, where previous generations look more at your output, the output of the leader, like, oh, are they making lots of money? Are they successful? Are they creating great content? Are they surrounded by people? So we look at kind of maybe the package, from a distance, and we're like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to be like that. I want to follow that. But Generation Z is much more skeptical of the package, and they're much more interested in seeing what's really inside you, and they want to get up close, and they want to get a taste of who you really are as a leader, and then maybe they'll trust you and follow you or want to be like you.
Yeah. And so the word authenticity, being authentic, is so common across social media and everywhere else. We think, where did that term really start? I think it actually started gaining some popularity, at least from my perspective, from millennials. Mm-hmm. We want to be authentic.
Yeah.
But again, it was more, I think,
more like idealized,
but never actually realized in a lot of ways. And Gen Z sees through that and goes, that some of that skepticalness actually can be a good thing there, and goes, well, you want to do something cool, great.
Yeah.
But we actually want to be authentic. And so it's more than just looking authentic and having good data that backs that up, lots of followers or whatever. It's looking through the heart to the character of that person who's in the front, or who's, who has the most authority in the room, and going, see, there's authenticity. But they're looking beyond what's being said to, again, kind of how, like, what is in the background of this leader that they're doing that, because I like that authenticity. I want some more of that, and it really does go into the realm of character. Yeah, most definitely. And I think moving forward in just general discussion of the idea of authority relating to time as well. So maybe in the idealized version of authenticity, it's having I like maybe the right show, putting on the right show in a way.
Yep.
Becomes very, very important. But maybe that's actually not communicating the right things in some ways to Generation Z.
So what you're saying is, from maybe our perspective as millennials, there might be a temptation for the millennial leaders to say, oh, you want authenticity? then let's make sure we package this well so that it looks authentic. And what you're saying is maybe that's not what Gen Z is actually asking for. They're asking for some vulnerability, some honesty,
some challenge,
some challenge. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that's true. It's always best to talk in concrete case study examples, but generally speaking, I think that's a fair thing to say. And maybe one of the reasons why is especially one interesting thing I hear often about Gen Z is that they don't like to plan anything, and they always do things last minute. And maybe that's truly authentic in some way that I don't understand as a millennial. I like my Google Calendar. It's great. Google, it was a great invention. So maybe part of it's to be truly authentic. It's also keeping your options open and available until the last possible moment. And I see that. That's true of Generation Z. Even true of some of the later millennials as well. But I think while maybe true, again, even of some millennials, it's a very general statement that obscures that Gen Z also desires meaningful structure instead of structure for the sake of structure.
That's right. So if there's some sort of, to illustrate it, if there's some sort of process that exists in your youth group for maybe getting new leaders on,
right.
It's not enough that there's just a process, but it needs to be a process that makes sense and that actually is helpful to the people who are being brought on.
Yeah, I think definitely so. And it's like, what would a ministry look like? It was like, we want to do things last minute, so we'll conform to that, and then that presents its own set of challenges, and maybe there are ways where that could work, but it also sort of obscures the idea that I think Gen Z also wants meaningful structure. They want meaningful reasons to do things, meaningful reasons to trust somebody. And so that's in a broader level, that's a meaningful structure instead of just doing something for the sake of doing it, or that's how it's always been done. Yeah. And there is something to be said for tradition, but I think that's one of the pieces why Gen Z versus the older generation,
Gen X.
Yes. Why there's probably some strong differences there. It's like we work so hard for that.
Yeah.
Tradition is very important, and then the younger generation is going, yes, it is. It's important. It's lived out as an important thing in a different way.
That's right. And to illustrate this, I worked with an intern about 3 years ago who was in a church with great heritage and like a long history. And yet there was a huge rift between the older generation and the younger generation. And so Gen X and probably later and now Gen Z. And this intern, this 19, 20-year-old intern, was just really frustrated with, why are we just doing things the same way we've always been doing? And I challenged him to go and seek the reasons, why the church was set up in that way. And he went back and interviewed a bunch of founding members of the church and found that some of the things that he cared about, they cared about it as well. And they, like you said, fought for their church, and they were actually a part of a huge revival back in the day. And they experienced, living faith, and all that eventually, that revival kind of then settled, and the church was really kind of branded by that experience. And through that, this intern was able to appreciate that actually there's a lot more commonality across those generations than expected. But the challenge for him is how to receive that and then carry it forward. Yeah.
Bare minimum, that shows that church history is important. Lived.
That's right.
Learning about church experience, church history, caused a broader perspective and seeing, we have some similarities. And that then can start a better discussion.
Yeah.
It's always best to start with commonality before you get into the differences. Otherwise, you just reinforce the
us versus them.
Yes, us versus them nature of it, which can be, is often reinforced in society in various ways. So the idea of meaningful structure, Elmore also says, the secret is choosing the narrative we will carry with us. Now that, to some people, they heard that and they cringed a little bit. Now, that does not mean that the biblical narrative is not true and that we define truth. That's not what that means. Rather, it means that what we believe actually shapes us. It does something to us. So if we believe half of the truth, that whether that's knowingly or unknowingly, then we are partly being shaped by our own ignorance to our own downfall. Was that the example you just shared actually is a perfect illustration of that. To the own downfall of not knowing some of the how and why that worked and caused revival before, and learning to appreciate that actually helped. But before, it was just ignorance, leading to a downfall of, my way's better than theirs, perhaps, something. So this speaks to the need to grow in education, I think, and learning. And whether or not we use the word education, learning. We should just adopt I can say this because I love it, right? We should all just adopt the position of being lifelong learners.
That's right.
Just being curious about everything and always asking questions. I think that can really go a long way to help with some generational divides within local churches. And then also having the openness and vulnerability to say, this actually is really meaningful to me. Yeah, I know that the older generation, I know you don't see that. I want to help. And at the same time going, there are things that I don't know. Teach me.
That's right.
So I want help, but I also don't want help.
But I also need to figure it out for myself, not just be told, oh, we figured it out 20 years ago. Just keep going.
Yeah. So they want to, Gen Z, figured out myself, but help me interpret what's going on.
That's right.
Because you have wisdom that I need. So they actually are saying that at the same time. Very, very interesting. Something that we need to begin thinking about for sure. So if we as leaders carry the narrative that Gen Z is anti-structure because they don't like to make firm plans.
Yeah.
Then that strategy might have to be a very decentralized ministry structure, which can be very difficult to impossible to understand what's going on in terms of core values. Tyler, what do you think? What is it if creating ministry strategies around half the story instead of maybe the full story?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think that some of those narratives of, they plan last minute. They just they live online. They're not super committed. They don't trust anyone. That can create some really weird ministry structures. And I think that in general, young people are, when young people, the issue with generations really is this issue of who am I and how do I fit into the world? And that's something that all of us went through as well. And we might have answered that in a different way, but I think we need to always have the benefit of the doubt, for the up and coming generation, and not just see them as lazy, as not planning, as, unstructured, as just hopelessly skeptical. I think that we need to do a better job at really listening, because otherwise we're just perpetuating these weird narratives of the young generation is stupid. I know I heard that in school a lot growing up, is like, psh, look at you, you're the worst class I've ever had. You're so lazy. And we're like, that may not be totally true. So I think we still do that a lot when we look down. And I was listening to an interview with a theologian engaging with some of these things about Generation Zet, and he fell into the same trap. And he was like, if they would only trust, the structure that's been handed to them, and they might act like they care about stuff, but they don't really actually care, and that's just not helpful.
Because it's not true.
This is not true.
I'm defending those who are younger than me in that way, and so are you.
Yeah.
Again, that connecting the why and the how. That it's not just doing stuff. It's not just blind trust. It's wanting to know how it all connects.
I think that's a huge gift to all of us, and to the church, and to the theological method as well, is that, yes, we receive what we've been given, but we also need to figure out how to receive it and how to live it, and then how to pass it on in a way that's honest and contextual, and is still honoring to the past.
Yeah. And Elmore says, in talking about leading Gen Z in times of disruption, offer context that has perspective. Give that some of that interpretation, some of what Gen Z might be missing. Give applications that offer clarity, that help with that anxiety. If I don't know what, offer potential applications, not solutions. Do it this way. You sort of are still doing that in how you shape what you say, but offering clarity, and then a belief that offers hope. Give a hope. And in doing these things, giving context, application, and belief that offers hope, we can begin to think about concretely what it looks like for millennial leaders, maybe Gen X leaders, to engage better with Generation Z through active listening. I mean, bare minimum. Bare minimum. Very important. Hard to do. Yeah. Hard to do, but very important. So context offering perspective, applications offering clarity, belief offering hope. And sort of on the tail end of that, he says we need to help them remember, them Gen Z, while encouraging and challenging them. That's the piece that we really, I think I've been thinking a lot about more recently. How do we help Generation Z remember while also encouraging them and challenging them at the same time, giving something very clear, because they don't not like authority, but if it has a good character behind it, then they will receive any challenge given. So that speaks a lot to, we should be focusing a lot on our own character within our ministries and seeking to grow. But maybe it could also look like, I know this isn't me saying this. This is Tim Elmore again. I have high expectations of you.
Right.
And Gen Z
raising the bar
actually raises their level to that occasion, going, oh, somebody believes in me. It helps with some of that internal angst or anxiety and a lot of those factors we were talking about earlier. I have high expectations of you because I know that you can do it, because I know that you can handle it. I think that you're probably stronger in many ways than you think you are. And here's a couple of recent examples that tell me why that's true of you.
Yeah. We've seen this in our college, like over the past 3 years, some of the greatest moments of growth have come from those who struggled the most and who needed a challenge. And it was because they received that challenge to rise, to even step into their areas of gifting and actually, live that out. That now 3 years later, we've seen incredible growth in them, and they're not done. It's not as if the package is now tightly wrapped up in a bow, but they rose to the occasion with the right challenge. Yeah,
and I tell students all the time, you can read their faces in a classroom going, oh, okay, I get this, but I don't know what I'm doing in terms of applying it. Like, it's just, you can just see it. And I like to meet students there where able. And just recently, teaching a course, there were, the whole class came to this line of thought that was two or three trajectories happening all at once that are in the realm of scholars who they don't know, nor have they read,
yes,
but they're published by the likes of like Oxford and Cambridge and some really nice, good, deep biblical schools. And I stopped. I said, you guys don't realize this, but I've read several books recently. I said, and I actually had some in my bag. I can pull them out if you want. But you've just said some things that are anticipating trajectories. I don't know if you realize it, but you're on the track of scholars.
Yeah.
You should have seen them, like, literally, if you're watching on YouTube, they're like this. Straight up. And they're like, wow. I did. And you can see it's almost like I didn't realize I could do that. At the same time, I then gave challenge.
That's right.
Context, giving them encouragement, and at the same time giving challenge. And it's almost like when you do that, it communicates somebody sees me. But if that person, again, has strong character, has been given authority by a Gen Z person to speak into them, they also can literally say in their own minds, Jesus really sees me. Wow, he actually cares. And he's demonstrating it through this person. Just a couple of examples.
That's great.
But So the idea of right kind of authority, very, very true. Couching it with encouragement can show Generation Zet actually is pracademic or praxological. Can we say that?
Oh, here we go. Now,
making it, well, we don't need to speak grammar, but I think that's an adjective or something. So as long as they're feeling empowered and supported to create and make changes on their own.
Yeah, that's right. Not just being told, hey, I figured this out. I've already solved this problem. Just follow these 3 steps. Generation Z does not need to hear that. They need to be given a hope, given a vision, or given some direction. And then they need to know the why behind that. They need to know, okay, why this direction? Why not a different direction? And then empowered to step out, to fail, probably to succeed, maybe even more than we have as well.
Yeah. And maybe one concrete thought reflection for takeaway is, in my ministry, what does it communicate? Like, what is it actually communicating to those in my ministry, to Gen Z people? Is it providing the right kind of structure? Is it giving a meaningful structure that people can understand? Am I helping them to see how this is important and how it connects to church history and tradition and things like that? Or maybe not. So what is what we're doing actually communicating? And is it communicating the right type of authority, or is it actually pushing people away? Just one final thought as we're sort of landing the plane of this episode. I think it's also definitely true that we who are leading Gen Z in ministries could be served well if we dwell on how the generation thinks about authority and how they receive input from us. If we consider how they will receive what we want to tell them, then it better informs how we can say basically what we would want to say. It just looks a little bit different. It's said in a little bit different way. And the stakes, I think, are Gen Z kids growing up in Christ and not being tossed to and fro because of leaders who can listen well and actually challenge growth by encouraging at the same time. So if you like this episode, this topic, we want you to again, smash that subscribe button on the, I don't know where it is, lower left-hand corner on YouTube, maybe lower right, somewhere below where we're speaking.
Some Gen Zer
they already did it before I said it. Yeah, they already did it before I said it. But also whatever your listening device is, so you can keep up to date with us. Next episode, we'll be continuing this idea of talking about authority and what we can do about it, how we can relate to it. So missional authority part 2.
Yeah, and we'll get a chance to dig a little bit deeper into the theological implications of this issue as well. We've spent a good amount of time understanding our context, and that's always a good first step, isn't it? To seek answer the question: who are we serving? Who is next to me? What's happening? What is God doing? And then take a step forward, bringing scripture, bringing theology. So I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah, we'll finish now with a reminder. Q&A is upcoming. It's going to be exciting. Submit your questions by January 31st. Less than 1 week. So if you're at your computer, stay there. And if you're not at your computer, we want you to run to your computer and pull it out, maybe your phone, and give us your questions now. We want to hear from you. Anything related to our discussion on reflection, rest, even authority, where we started that discussion today. With that, we'll see you next time to talk about missional authority on the Praxologie podcast, where we are striving to think biblically, reflect theologically, and act missionally. Blessings until next time.
See you guys next time.